Imagine walking along a quiet stretch of beach, and suddenly your radio starts picking up something that shouldn't exist. Today we're exploring one of the most peculiar and unnerving anomalies in the SCP Foundation archives, SCP-9981. This anomaly isn't a creature you can chase or a room you can lock up. It's a radio broadcast that defies physics, meaning, and human comprehension. It broadcasts eerie tones and fragmented speech along a desolate coastline, and every time the signal appears, a strange psychological horror event, known in Foundation files as a YAMA event, follows shortly after. Let's dive into what SCP-9981 is, how it works, and why it matters. SCP-9981 was first catalogued after strange reports from locals on a 5-kilometer stretch of beach between two specific points on England's southwest coast. People reported hearing indecipherable radio signals late at night in the AM band, signals that, according to physics, shouldn't be receivable on that part of the spectrum through so much rock and earth. Once the Foundation confirmed these reports, Site 9981A was established to monitor the broadcasts and study their effects. Advanced surveillance arrays were deployed, all human witnesses were interviewed and amnesticized, and specialized equipment was set up to log and transcribe the signals as safely as possible. Special containment protocols even require that recorded broadcasts be filtered, transcribed, and then destroyed every month, because prolonged exposure may worsen their anomalous psychological effects. Each SCP-9981 broadcast lasts anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes and occurs at unpredictable intervals, roughly once every week on average, but sometimes as close as every 13 hours. The signal has two distinct phases, a series of tones and clicks, strangely reminiscent of whale or cetacean communications, repeated 6 times. This takes up most of the broadcast's duration. Then, a fragmented human voice with an Atlantic accent begins speaking in English, but the sentences never form coherent meaning. Instead, listeners hear phrases that don't quite connect, interrupted by static and background noise. The speaker sounds tired, as though straining to breathe. Scientists have even detected a secondary infrasonic signal hidden beneath the broadcast, something that may be the true anomalous data the transmission is trying to mask. One of the stranger things about 9981 is its semanto-dissociative effect, a phenomenon in which the meaning of communication becomes unhinged from its medium. In practice, this means memorized recordings, written notes, even human memories of the broadcasts eventually become unreliable or nonsensical over time. It's not just static or unintelligible speech, it fundamentally corrupts how meaning is processed, making transcription and analysis extremely difficult and potentially dangerous. That's why all equipment that captures or stores SCP-9981 material must be destroyed regularly. Shortly after a broadcast, usually 4 to 5 hours later, the Foundation has documented what are called YAMA events occurring in isolated individuals around the world. These events are deeply disturbing psychological phenomena triggered by the broadcasts, affecting people even far from the original beach. These events can last from hours to several weeks, and they disproportionately affect people near large bodies of water or with certain psychological vulnerabilities. YAMA stands for, yet another mysterious after effect, and at least 59 such events have been catalogued in Foundation archives following SCP-9981 broadcasts. These are not random, they share consistent patterns that make them uniquely identifiable to researchers. In many YAMA events, the first phase is a subtle but unnerving sensory distortion. Subjects report echoes of their own voice in quiet rooms, even when no one else is present. Shadows stretching and deepening unnaturally, especially near walls and corners. Static or low-frequency hums that seem to echo the broadcast itself. These effects often feel external and not under the subject's control, like the world has warped around them in a way that feels eerily linked to the original signal. Some of the most alarming YAMA cases involve the appearance of indistinct figures or shapes in the archives. These aren't solid entities, but fleeting visual phenomena, apparent silhouettes in peripheral vision that disappear when looked at directly. Momentary flashes of movement behind subjects. Unexplained visual artifacts reminiscent of the distorted speech patterns in the broadcast. While none of these figures have been conclusively shown to interact physically with the environment, their presence consistently correlates with higher stress and memory alteration in the subjects. One of the defining elements of YAMA events is that they don't just affect someone's senses, they elevate distortions into cognition itself. Subjects often misremember conversations from before the event. Find that words or concepts they once understood become nonsensical or stripped of meaning over time. Believe they heard entire conversations or messages that never happened. The Foundation classifies this as a form of semantodissociation, where meaning and language itself becomes unreliable within the mind of the subject, a terrifying psycholinguistic effect that parallels the anomalous broadcast's distortion of coherent speech. YAMA events aren't just perceptual, they also affect behavior. Recorded cases include individuals avoiding light or sound entirely, believing it draws the anomaly closer. Subjects obsessively replaying parts of the broadcast in their head. Extreme anxiety or paranoia focused on patterns of speech, shadows, or rhythmic sounds. Some subjects alter their routines drastically, refusing to leave darkened rooms, covering mirrors, or spending hours trying to decode non-existent meanings in their own memories. In most documented YAMA events, the aftereffects peak a day or two after the broadcast and gradually decline if the subject is removed from exposure and given proper amnestics or psychological support. However, some events persist for weeks. One of the earliest documented YAMA events targeted a Scottish farm owner named Kenneth MacDonald, 45. After an SCP-9981 broadcast with the phrase, "player versus player, begin meal," MacDonald experienced animal hallucinations and aggressive livestock behavior, notably sheep exhibiting maternal cannibalism and attacking his sheepdog. Eventually he became disoriented during routine tasks. Later agents found his home with the oven left on and strange masses of pulp tissue in drains, including a partially eaten pot pie with unidentifiable meat. Another YAMA event affected a wildlife researcher named Marcus Veldman near Great Slave Lake. After a 9981 broadcast with Respect Habitat, Gourmet, Veldman noticed desynchronized reflections, eventually seeing the back of his own head in a mirror. He also encountered inexplicable radar readings and disappearing animal predators, culminating with an intense psychological break and loss of consciousness. Nearby, the Foundation found evidence of unusual animal distribution and even deceased bears with cervical fractures. In a YAMA event 26, California County Sheriff James Chen, 27, responded to a distress radio call from a junior officer after an SCP-9981 transmission saying "player versus environment." Deep in a redwood forest his K9 became unnerved, he experienced pressure in his ears and the moonlight seemed unnaturally dim. He even perceived the junior officer's voice emanating from a massive, swaying tree, adding a layer of perceptual distortion greater than simple hallucination. Though he escaped, his K9 unit later was found mauled in a way inconsistent with normal canid behavior, and another K9 unit from before the event was unaccounted for. While SCP-9981 is known for its anomalous radio broadcasts and semantodissociative effects, one of the most unsettling parts of its file comes from Dr. Williams, a Foundation researcher stationed at Provisional Site 9981/A who experienced a YAMA event firsthand. Her log gives a deeply personal look at how the anomaly can warp reality and psyche in ways that aren't just scientific, they're visceral. In surveillance logs recorded on the night of 25 March 2025, Dr. Williams is seen working late on classification training materials when she begins showing signs of cognitive strain, clenching her jaw, losing focus, and eventually adding liqueur to her coffee as stress and isolation weigh on her. As the YAMA event progresses, her organization index, a measure of cognitive performance, steadily declines, suggesting the anomaly not only affects perception but mental stability. The log cuts between her mundane actions, spilling coffee, growing agitated, talking to her sleeping dog Perry, and moments of escalating unease. She begins speaking aloud as if responding to someone who isn't there, calling out names and confronting imagined voices. At one point she retrieves a Glock pistol stored for self-defense, expecting someone outside the locked site, but finds nothing there. Finally she throws open the doors, still convinced someone is calling to her, only to lock them again with a mixture of fear and defiance. The Dr. Williams logs document the most intimate and devastating YAMA event connected to SCP-9981, not because it was the most violent, but because it shows how the anomaly targets grief, memory, and love rather than curiosity or exposure. At the time of the incident, Dr. Abigail Williams was the sole on-site researcher stationed at Provisional Site 9981/A, tasked with monitoring 9981's anomalous radio broadcasts. She had been reassigned there following the death of her wife, Agent Riya Tripathi, killed during a hostile group of interest operation. The posting was meant to be quiet, isolated, safe. It was not. The event begins not with a broadcast, but with something far worse, a voice Williams knows. In her own words, when she hears her wife's voice calling out in the dead of night, her first instinct is not fear, it's hope. Some part of her always believed Riya would come back. That belief is what 9981 exploits. But training overrides instinct. Williams arms herself, knowing that when something calls to you at night, you don't answer empty-handed. That decision haunts her. She recognizes that the moment she grabs her gun, she is losing Riya all over again, but she does it anyway. She leaves her home and follows the voice into the fields and wooded hills near the site, guided only by her phone's torch and the pull of unfinished grief. No cameras follow her. No instruments record what happens next. But something is watching. As Williams approaches and climbs a hill, the voice leads her higher. She speaks to the darkness as if Riya is standing just out of sight. She talks about cooking, about small domestic memories, about how she cut her hand trying to prepare a roast Riya used to make. She reaches out, offering her hand to something that never appears. And slowly, she realizes the truth: whatever is calling her is wearing Riya's voice, but it is not Riya. Williams says goodbye, not because she is ready, but because she has to be. She explicitly tells the presence that it does not deserve her wife's face. That is when she notices the pillar of darkness rising from Provisional Site 9981/A. And she runs. When Williams returns to the site, it is already too late. The building is alive with shadow. The doorway is occupied by a vast, vertical mass of darkness, stretching upward into the sky. From it extend enormous hands, jointed incorrectly, covered in coarse, waxy skin, fingers bending the wrong way. These are not hallucinations. They are physical. And in those hands is Perry, Williams' dog. The last living thing she has left. The entity is proud of what it's holding. Williams opens fire. The creature bleeds. It reacts. Its grip falters. Williams charges forward without hesitation, wrenching its joints apart with her bare hands, screaming at Perry to hold on. At one point she is knocked aside by a single finger, but she gets back up, even biting into the entity's flesh, spitting out its blood before it can affect her. She tears Perry free. The entity withdraws, rising out of sight, vanishing as suddenly as it appeared. Inside the site, the damage is catastrophic. Walls are gouged deeply. Cabinets are torn open. Utensils are scattered and twisted. A paring knife is embedded in the ceiling, warped beyond use. Blood pools unnaturally, refusing to congeal. William surveys the destruction, then looks down at Perry. "Worth it," she says. She kneels and holds him as her shoulders shake in silence. The last SCP-9981 broadcast to date consisted of 59 repeated phrases like "closing ceremony" and "first place," interspersed with strange sounds of grinding rock, tearing fiber, and whimpering. The meaning of this transmission remains unknown, but it clearly marked something significant. The aftermath was catastrophic. When Foundation search teams re-entered Provisional Site 9981/A, they found the entire facility torn apart. The walls bore deep gashes, blood pooled across the floorboards that didn't congeal or dry, and fragments of a canine spinal cord, later identified as belonging to Dr. Williams' beloved dog, Perry, were found chewed and frayed in a kitchen drawer. These gruesome details show just how far the YAMA event had warped the environment around her. At level 4 clearance, the SCP-9981 file reveals a final, unsettling truth. 9981 is no longer treated as a single broadcast anomaly, but as a global population of anomalous canids embedded seamlessly into everyday life. There are an estimated 7,009,981 instances worldwide, indistinguishable from normal dogs. They do not age, reproduce, or shed fur, but otherwise behave exactly like mundane animals. The Foundation considers them impossible to meaningfully contain. Instead, containment consists of tracking their locations, population density, movement patterns, and anomalous behavior. Most disturbing of all is their origin. Each 9981 instance is believed to be a replacement, created during a YAMA event. When a normal dog is consumed or destroyed during one of these events, it is recreated afterward, identical in appearance, but anomalous. In Foundation theory, this represents a form of conservation carried out by whatever entities orchestrate YAMA events. In other words, SCP-9981 isn't an invasion. It's a quiet correction, one that's already complete. Follow for more SCP deep dives.